Welcome to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 27 of the 2023 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And this is the fourth installment of our positional rankings. Last time we talked about the receivers. This time we're taking a look at the tight end class. Now, as we've done with previous positional rankings, we've taken a look at the quarterbacks, the running backs, and then the receivers. We've actually gone back, taken a look at the last 5 years, really seeing what's happened in the past to kind of predict what's going to happen going forward. This year's tight end class, we have as many as probably 8 guys who can end up being a number one tight end at the next level. So let's go ahead and jump right into things. We take a look at 2018, right? 2018, we have 15 tight ends taken. This was the year that we just had Hayden Hurst, the lone first-round draft pick there of the Baltimore Ravens, number 25 overall. Mike Gesicki, Dallas Goedert, Mark Andrews, Jordan Akins as your day 2 tight ends. So we know what's happened there. Dallas Goedert has played well for the Eagles. Mark Andrews was a steal at number 86 overall. I think a lot of what you saw, those combine results, just, didn't really wow you. I think some of the other guys really have better combines overall, but Mark Andrews clearly is the gem of this draft class. You look at a guy like Michael Mayer, you can compare his stats a little bit there at the combine, the athletic profile, to Mark Andrews. If I'm a betting man, I would still take Michael Mayer there in round number 1. I don't think teams want to make that same mistake twice with the guy who potentially projects similar to Mark Andrews at the next level. Will Dissly, coming out of Washington, going to Seattle in the 4th round. He saw some success there with the Hawks. Durham Smythe to the Dolphins in the 4th. He's still in the league. Dalton Schultz, he was with the Cowboys. We know that he's left a free agency, big free agent signing. He came off the board there in the 4th round. Tyler Conklin is another tight end that's still sticking with the roster. He came off the board in the 5th round as well. 2019, we had 16 tight ends taken, and that's where we had 2 tight ends come off the board in the top 20. Not just one guy from Iowa, but 2 tight ends from Iowa. We know that Iowa is a hotbed for tight ends, and we have one in this year's draft in Sam Laporta. TJ Hawkinson coming off the board, number 8 to the Lions. We know the Lions traded him to the Vikings, and that really creates a hole there for the Lions. I think they're going to have to draft a tight end at some point. Honestly, no offense to Brock Wright, but he's not a number 1 tight end. This is a guy that can really get it done in the trenches more than anything else. Noah Fant then goes to the Broncos there at number 20 overall. We know he was a part of the Russell Wilson deal. He's now in Seattle. Irv Smith Jr. Coming from Bama, 2nd round pick. Same with Drew Sample to the Bengals. Really hasn't panned out like I think people were expecting. Round number 3, we saw a bunch of tight ends taken. Josh Oliver, Jay Sternberger, Kahale Waring, guys that really didn't translate to the next level. Dawson Knox, though, out of Mississippi, 96 overall, 32nd pick in round number 3. You want to talk about a gem? There you go. Foster Moreau, taken there in the 4th round out of LSU, going to the Raiders. That was a solid pickup as well. So that's really the 2019 16 total tight ends taken. And when you talk about that, we've got 8 tight ends that were taken in the first 3 rounds of the draft. In 2018, conversely, you just had those 5. So, and they still have 15 tight ends taken. So 15 and 16 in the first 2 drafts there. 2020, the draft class here was really lacking, to say the least. Cole Kmet was the lone in the first 2 rounds of the draft to be selected. Number 43 overall to the Bears. We know he's the starter there in Chicago. Then you had the Patriots taking 2 tight ends. It was a kind of a head scratcher. Devin Asiasi, Dalton Kincaid. Neither one of them are with the Patriots anymore. Josiah DeGuara is the lone tight end standing there with the Packers, also a 3rd round pick. Adam Troutman has seen some success there with the Saints, taken towards the end of round number 3. Harrison Bryant, Albert Oebunam, a couple of guys that still show some promise there to the Browns and Broncos respectively. Colby Parkins has seen some time. Bryson Hopkins came up big for the Rams, in the playoffs down the stretch during their Super Bowl run. So 12 tight ends taken there, just 5 in day 2 of the draft. 2021, just 12 tight ends taken yet again. So you look at it and the strength of the tight end classes, back-to-back years with just 12 tight ends. Here we had, obviously Kyle Pitts was a generational type talent coming out, number 4 overall. The athleticism there that he brought to the tight end position, really kind of a unique talent. Really waiting for him to get going though with Atlanta. Now they have Desmond Ridder throwing him the football. He's got some additional weapons in there. They've got Drake London running the ball a little bit with Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson. They got to continue to get some weapons there and really be able to start utilizing Kyle Pitts. There's no reason why he can't be in the upper echelon of the tight ends in the league. Pat Freiermuth, the lone tight end taken in round number 2, going to the Steelers. Hunter Long ultimately was traded to the Rams. We know as part of that Jalen Ramsey deal, there are some questions about whether or not he's really committed to football. So that was a curious pick there, as high as he was in round number 3. Tommy Tremble to the Panthers. This is a guy I think he's a good role player for them, as is Trey McKinney, more of a blocking tight end than anything else. So again, 5 tight ends taken in the first 2 days of the draft. After that, you're looking at Kylan Granson. He's gotten some playing time there with the Colts. Brevin Jordan to the Texans in round number 5. Noah Gray to the Chiefs, also taken there in round number 5. Last year, not really a strong draft at the top, yet we still saw 18 tight ends taken. So I think there's really an appetite for bringing in additional tight end love. So I think that's why we're going to see more guys drafted than I think we're probably expecting out of this year's draft class. 18 tight ends taken. And if you'll recall, Trey McBride was a top tight end taken, number 55 overall to the Cardinals. Only tight end taken in round number 2. Round 3, we just saw 3 guys taken. So that's Jelani Woods, we know is going to end up being tight end 1 for the Colts. Greg Dulcich to the Broncos, a guy that I think can still get the job done. Jeremy Ruckert to the Jets. And then in round 4, we saw just a wave of tight ends. Cade Otton to the Buccaneers, waiting for him to really see what he can do. Daniel Bellinger to the Giants. He's one of those guys that has really started to step up his game. Now that you have Darren Waller there in New York, I think what's going to be interesting is seeing how that affects Daniel Bellinger. I think that's going to actually help him out as that number 2 tight end. You've got Charlie Kolar there to the Ravens, along with Isaiah Likely. Likely's actually been the better receiver of the 2 to this point. Jake Ferguson's been a decent role player there for the Cowboys, all taken there in round number 4. Then you have also Chig Okonkwo going to the Titans. He's a guy that, he was getting seeing a lot of action. I know fantasy players really taking a look at Chig Okonkwo there at that tight end spot. Round number 5, Cole Turner still developing as a tight end. Tegan Catoriano, really known for his blocking there with the Texans. And Grant Calcaterra going to the Eagles as an additional tight end in round number 6. Receiving weapon there, probably a 3rd tight end. And then you got Ko Kieft out of Minnesota. Nobody was talking about this guy as someone that was going to get drafted. And he was 39th pick of the 6th round. That's 218 overall. Really a blocker there in Minnesota. I think that's really what the Bucs were looking for with Ko Kieft, drafting him there in that spot, looking for that blocking tight end. So I think there are some guys in this year's draft class as well that could be that blocking tight end, and we could potentially see them sneak into the draft. What's interesting is, over the course of these last 5 drafts, how many tight ends were taken in round 6 and 7 of the draft. So if you look at 2018, just 1 in each round. 2020, we had 2 in round 6, 1 in round 7, none in those rounds in 2021. We saw a run of tight ends in round 6 in 2022 with 4, 1 in round 7, and then 2019, just 1 in round 6, but then you have 4 come off the board in round 7. So, really, for the most part, what you're seeing is a lot of tight ends that are taken in the first 5 rounds of the draft. This past season, we actually, the past draft, 2022, we saw 13 taken in the first 5 rounds of the draft. I'm looking at this year's draft class, and I see a lot of guys that we could end up hearing their names called in the first 5, 6 rounds. It's just going to be a matter of really how this spreads out. So we're going to go ahead and go through really what I see in terms of some of the rankings, when they're going to come off the board, and where they may be going, and even take a look at a few other guys on top of that group. So when I look at that tight end group, we've got 3 tight ends that can potentially come off the board in round number 1, and Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, and Darnell Washingon. And that would be the first time that we've seen 3 tight ends come off the board in round 1 since 2017, when O.J. Howard, Evan Engram, and David Njoku came off the board. 19, 23, and 29 overall to the Bucks, Giants, and Browns. When you look at this draft class, you've got a little bit of everything, right? You've got Dalton Kincaid, who is the superior receiver. You've got Michael Mayer, who is your all-around tight end, really that Y that you're looking for. And then Darnell Washingon, it looks like he's going to be another offensive lineman out there, but some surprising athleticism that we saw at the combine. He's really a physical freak, really used more as a blocker there for the Bulldogs. So really, that's more of a projection than anything else. What can he do for your team at the next level? So when we look at it, I think Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer, it's going to be interesting to see where these 2 guys go. I still have Dalton Kincaid a little bit ahead of Michael Mayer in terms of where they're going to come off the board in the draft. Dalton Kincaid, 6'4", 246 pounds, and you put on the film and you see the speed, you see his route running ability. When healthy, this guy, he was a favorite target of Cam Rising there at Utah. 70 passes, 890 yards, 8 touchdowns. If you just put on the film against USC when the Utes faced the Trojans the first time around, you'll see a complete performance by a receiving tight end. Stretch the defense underneath, up the seam, to the outside, proved to have incredible hands with a large catch radius, hauling in everything that was thrown his way, dynamic, elusive after the catch, finishing with 16 receptions for 234 yards and a touchdown. Really the biggest thing is can this guy stay healthy? That's the biggest thing. And that's where his draft stock could potentially slide. But I look at him, and I look at a team like, obviously Green Bay is going to be highlighted as a team that needs a tight end. If anything, I would see Michael Mayer going there. I think they're going to want a guy that is going to handle some of the blocking duties. I think Kincaid still has a long way to go from a blocking standpoint, but again, that superior receiving ability. Washingon at 16. That's where I know a lot of Washington fans, they want to see a corner or they want to see an offensive lineman. When I take a look at Washington and their situation, you've got Logan Thomas there at tight end, and frankly, he's not a guy, he's been solid for them, but he's not a guy that's going to strike fear in opposing defenses. And I think with Dalton Kincaid and what he was able to do at the collegiate level, if he can bring that route running ability and his ability to make plays after the catch to the Commanders in an offense that already has Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, just adding another weapon for Sam Howell there at the quarterback spot. I think that could potentially be a landing spot. As I continue to look down the board, I think the Chargers are going to need another playmaker there at that tight end position. They've got Gerald Everett and Donald Parham. I think you could potentially add a tight end there. But I'm looking at the Dallas Cowboys. And with Dallas, obviously we know that Dalton Schultze is gone. No longer there, left in free agency. So what are you going to do if you're Dallas? You've already brought in Stephon Gilmore. You add a corner. You bring in Brandon Cooks to replace Amari Cooper as a running mate for CeeDee Lamb. Franchise tag on Tony Pollard. So you bring that piece in there and Ronald Jones to be his backup. At this point, it kind of feels like we're looking at that tight end position. And I think that'd be really a nice fit. Really be able to stretch the defense in a lot of ways and really give Dak Prescott another weapon there. If not Dallas, then I think Buffalo is an interesting spot. The Bengals, the Saints as well. So then we're going to take a look at Michael Mayer after that. So Michael Mayer, 6'4.5", 249 pounds, ran a 4.740 at the combine, just a 32.5-inch vertical leap. Not anything to write home about in terms of that explosiveness. But when you talk about Michael Mayer, he's really the most complete tight end in this year's draft class. And so he's not as explosive as Dalton Kincaid, but look, he's polished as a blocker. He's a reliable target in the passing attack. Really physical inline blocker, plays with good leverage, quick feet, slides, picks up defenders, solid punch at the point of attack, good grip strength to sustain his blocks as well. As a receiver, he holds Notre Dame career records for a tight end in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. When you watch him, he's never going to be a burner deep, but he's really tough on those short to intermediate routes. He's quick through his breaks to create some separation, really strong hands at the catch point, and then he's tough to bring down as a receiver. again, I think Green Bay is probably going to want that complete tight end. So I think 15 could potentially be where he comes off the board. But I'm also looking at the Bills, and that's where I have him mocked right now. You already have Dawson Knox there, but look, you need to make sure that you're keeping Josh Allen upright while also getting him another tight end option there. And when I look at Buffalo, I think that'd be a great fit in that offense. Again, you bring some of that blocking ability. You allow him to also block for James Cook and Damian Harris and company. I think that just brings another dynamic to that offense. Dawson Knox can attack the seam vertically a little bit more than Mayer can. But Mayer can do a lot of that dirty work on the short to intermediate routes, and a guy that's going to break some tackles and get down the field. So those are two guys that I think are locks for the first round. Darnell Washington is interesting. He's 6'7", 264 pounds, and when you watch his film, a lot of it is the blocking. And really, because of his size, he does look like a 6 offensive lineman out there. And the real thing was, you saw some glimpses as a receiver, catching the ball, being able to run away from guys a little bit, be a weapon up the seam, some body control, but we really didn't know exactly what we had in Darnell Washington. Then he shows up at the combine and took it to another level. 4.64 40, a blistering 4.08 short shuttle that was second only to Jackson Smith and Jigba if we were including our wide receiver prospects. The length, you absolutely see that. This is a guy, almost 34 and a half inch arms. And, that 10-yard split as well. I forgot to mention that. That was a 1.57, which actually tied him with Brenton Strange and Zach Kuntz, but very quick to get up to speed for a guy his size. And with all those long arms, still able to put up 225, 21 times in the bench press. And when you watched him catching the ball, they're putting on a show, leaping ability, body control, making a one-handed catch, being able to keep his feet in bounds. This guy could be a red zone nightmare. He's already an exceptional blocker. If you watch the combine at all, you would have seen him pushing that sled. I mean, he moved that sucker. Not even Michael Mayer was moving it to the degree that Darnell Washington was. So the strength is absolutely there. I look at Cincinnati, and obviously Cincinnati, they lost Hayden Hurst and his 52 receptions. This is a guy, I think right now, Devin Asiasi was really the only tight end on the roster there for Cincinnati with any playing time, really. Then they bring in Irv Smith Jr. as a free agent. But again, Irv Smith Jr., I think to me is really a number 2 tight end. You get Darnell Washington in here. Obviously you need to take care of Joe Burrow. You've got Orlando Brown. You brought him in to shore up that left tackle position. We know it was kind of a work in progress with that offensive line, especially when Jonah Williams went down to injury. You've got Lael Collins on the roster as well. Jackson Carman was having to fill in at left tackle. They've got better depth on the offensive line now as a result of that, but having a tight end that can block, I think is really going to be a key to their success. So, I think Darnell Washington doesn't get out of round number 1. Which then takes us to the second round. And I currently, when I look at my mock, and I'm putting together my latest mock draft, and kind of working through round number 3 right now. But I look at Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State, 6'6", 253. I'm looking at the New Orleans Saints. But when you talk about this, Musgrave, shared time with Tegan Catoriano in 2021, suffered a knee injury that really cut his season short after 2 games this past season. So small body of work, but he's been impressive with the straight line speed, separates quickly. He's got the bloodlines, NFL quarterback, longtime coach Bill Musgrave is his uncle. Tremendous body control, concentration, strong hands, attacks the football in the air. Needs to work on the blocking, needs to add some strength there to be a more effective blocker. But the athleticism is unreal. He's got really big hands as well, nearly 10.5 inches. So when you're talking about the ability to haul in the football, it's not going anywhere. This is a guy that you have some confidence with feeding him the football. 4.61 40, 1.54 10-yard split, so the fastest in terms of getting up to speed as well. 36-inch vertical leap. To me, Luke Musgrave feels like the number 4 tight end. I think he ends up coming off the board in round number 2. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because we have some other guys that could potentially come off the board in round number 2. In my mock, I don't have any. I look at Sam Laporta, and I think there's a chance he can come off the board in round 2, potentially to the Lions. I think ultimately the Lions take him in round number 3. They could trade back into round 2 to get him. But Sam Laporta, 6'3", 245, ran a 4.59 40 at the combine, 6'9", 1.3 cone drill as well. So when you look at Laporta, he's definitely an athlete, definitely a guy that knows how to haul in the football and make plays. He struggles with the blocking, which is kind of surprising coming from Iowa. But man, he was a go-to target for Spencer Petras. Impressive route running, ability to attack the middle of the field. Just as impressive was the ability to make the plays after the catch, as I mentioned. He was running through tackles, making plays, fighting for additional yards. And look, just put on the film of the Music City Bowl against Kentucky, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. There was a quick throw over the middle, moved well laterally, bounces it to the outside, broke 6 tackles, including a spin move to free from the first tackle, gets down the field, uses a stiff arm to shove a defensive back aside for a 27-yard gain. Iowa ended up scoring on the next play as he went down to the 15-yard line. This dude was lowering his shoulder into the linebacker, driving him into the ground, back shoulder throws, adjusting to the football, plucking it with his hands. This is a dude that played with a torn meniscus. He tore it on November 17th, and this guy was still just a man out there among boys in terms of guys trying to make tackles on him and just guys bouncing off. But when you think of Iowa tight ends, obviously Dallas Clark, C.J. Fedorowicz, George Kittle, Noah Fant, T.J. Hawkinson. I think Sam Laporta is going to be the next Iowa tight end that we're going to see coming off the board. And I think round 2 is a possibility, but I think the Lions, I already mentioned that they need tight end help, and I think Sam Laporta can absolutely be that guy and end up being tight end number 1 for them. Which then brings us to Tucker Kraft out of South Dakota State. 6'5", 254 pounds, ran a 4.69 40 at the combine. Also put up 225 23 times. This is a guy who I think is a pretty solid all-around tight end. A guy that can block for you. He can be physical in that running game. Did a great job. If you watched him against North Dakota State in the FCS championship, he was very physical at the point of attack. Basically blocked down on a corner, pinned him to the inside, sealed him off, allowing the running back Isaiah Davis to get a couple more blocks from the other tight end and the guard. Ended up taking off for a touchdown. This is a guy, they always line them up wide, and they're allowing him to make some blocks. Had a devastating block on a run play there by Amar Johnson. I think the corner really wasn't ready for the block. Drills him to the ground, and then ultimately continues to just dominate the guy while he's on the ground. But also really a nice receiver, excellent concentration, good hands, decent route runner. But I just love the physicality as a blocker. And I mentioned that Green Bay wants to have that total package as a tight end. And if they don't go Michael Mayer in round number 1, I think they can wait until round 3 and pick up Tucker Kraft, and I think they'll be just as happy bringing him into the fold. He's the guy that can really bring that physicality to the running game with the likes of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So next, we're going to take a look at Luke Schoonmaker there out of Michigan. 6'5", 251. He himself, ran a 4.63 40 at the combine. Really good speed for a guy his size. I mean, it's very rangy guy. A guy that can get physical. If you watch him in that Fiesta Bowl, first play, lines up at fullback, picks up the linebacker Jamoy Hodge downhill, and Edwards cuts right off that block, bursts down the field for 53 yards. You see the route running ability, runs a corner route. Afterward, clears that linebacker, able to make the catch down the field, turns up the field for a 32-yard gain. He did miss two games due to injury. Injured his shoulder in the first half of that Fiesta Bowl game and didn't return. But with Schoonmaker, this is a guy that I don't think people were expecting him to be as athletic as he was. I think he was a guy that, obviously Michigan was a run-first offense, so you got to see a lot of the physicality in the blocking. 35 catches for 418 yards and 3 touchdowns, but he really started to showcase some of that athleticism and playmaking ability really after the season, when we got into the pre-draft process. I think he's a guy that could end up being a steal for a franchise that's looking for a tight end in round number 3. And when I look at where I think Schoonmaker could go, Commanders, if they're not sold with Logan Thomas, they don't end up taking Dalton Kincaid. I've got them taking him at number 97 right now, and I look at the fit. He'll bring some physicality to the running game, obviously, and then as a receiver, really, that development. I think it'll probably take a little bit of time, but he's one of those guys that you're expecting to see him start to take off. Obviously, not quite the athlete that George Kittle was when he was at Iowa, but look, George Kittle didn't catch a ton of passes at Iowa, but the thing was the athletic profile jumped off the charts. He was a 5th round pick. I think Luke Schoonmaker comes off the board a little bit sooner. I think teams are learning from their mistakes, or at least they should be. And so I think Schoonmaker comes off the board in round 3 and can end up being a starting tight end there for the Washington Commanders. I'm not saying that he's the next George Kittle, but just saying that when you look at these guys, just because they're in an offense that is really known for running the football. You see the blocking prowess, but man, they can catch the football a little bit as well. And George Kittle, man, you want to talk about a ferocious blocker. That dude loves to block. I mean, if you watch NFL films, anytime that he's mic'd up, this guy's having a ball out there blocking. It's pretty funny to actually watch. Brenton Strange out of Penn State. I actually had him coming off the board in round 4, round 5 range, and he's a guy that's been rising up draft boards. People have been talking about him quite a bit. 6'4", 253, ran a 4.7 40, which is solid for a tight end. 36-inch vertical leap as well. And with Brenton Strange, look, this was one of the go-to targets there for Sean Clifford in that passing game. 32 catches, 362 yards, 5 touchdowns. Can be a weapon down the middle of the field. When I look at a team like Miami doesn't have Mike Gesicki anymore. Obviously, any of these guys can end up going to Miami, but I think Miami doesn't have a first-round pick. They're probably not going to go tight end in round number 1, but I think they can wait. With their first pick in round number 2, but they can wait and end up picking up Brenton Strange in round 3, possibly round 4, like I said. But I think because of the chatter with him, he may not be on the board at that point. Round 4. This one's interesting. Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion, 6'7", 255. And I mean, what's with the guys that are 6'7", running these quick 40 times? Ran a 4.5 540, 40-inch vertical leap, a 6.87 3-cone drill, and then ran a 4.12 short shuttle, and he repped out 225 23 times with 34-inch arms. When you guys with the longer arms, that bar's got to travel a lot farther than some of these guys with the shorter arms. So obviously impressive there. And with Zach Kuntz, this is a guy, he still needs to develop as a blocker, but man, he is a lot of fun to watch. And I know that he was slowed by injuries in 2022, just played in 5 games, but put on the film of 2021. 73 catches, 692 yards, 5 touchdowns. A guy that can stretch the field vertically, has the ability to contort his body to make an awkward catch look easy. Really a large catch radius, and he's just a guy that is going to make plays down the field. Like I said, he's not going to be much of a blocker, but at least starting out. But you love the length, you love the route running ability, his ability to separate at times. Comes back to the football, can be a weapon in the red zone. Zach Kuntz is the guy that I think could end up really bursting and being one of those surprises in this year's draft. Next on the list, we're going to round number 5. Kuntz, 4th, 5th round, probably feels about right there. 5th round, though, I'm looking at Payne Durham out of Purdue. When you talk about Durham, runs a 4.87 40, not overly spectacular there by any stretch of the imagination. 6'6", 253, but this guy, he's a hard worker. He's a guy that's going to do a lot of the dirty work. And we saw that there with the Boilermakers, kind of embodied that whole that program there. Played 4 years of high school lacrosse, just 1 year of high school football. This dude was a weapon on third downs, was able to get behind the linebackers time and time again, be a physical blocker as well, freeing up guys, for their cutback lanes. A guy that can get vertically a little bit, ultimately able to get himself uncovered and make a play on the football. Difficult to bring down after the catch as well. Can be a little, bring some physicality. He's a guy that I think probably is going to be a number 2, but could end up being a starter at the next level at some point. Then you have Cameron Latou. They're out of Alabama. And when you look at Cameron Latou, 6'4", 242, this is the guy who started his career on defense, on the defensive side of the football, and has moved over to offense. And he's another guy that can be a physical blocker. And he's developing as a receiver. I think he has a knack for just finding openings in defenses. 56 catches, 787 yards, and 12 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons at Bama. And he converted from linebacker to tight end prior to the 2019 season. And a guy that he's continuing to learn, continuing to develop. That's why I've got him rated lower. But look, he was a go-to guy when Bryce Young needed to find, make a play. Cameron Latou was kind of a safety valve for him. And so I think 5th round probably feels about right. There's some development that still needs to be made, but a guy that can absolutely make some plays for you. Davis Allen out of Clemson. Have him coming off the board right now in that 5th to 6th round range. 6'6", 245. Ran a 4.8, 440, just like Payne Durham. Not a guy that's going to be overly explosive. 38.5-inch vertical leap. That definitely checks out. When you watch him play, he's a red zone guy. Balls thrown behind him. He's able to reach back and adjust to the football and make a play on it. A guy that can be a weapon down the seam a little bit, but really the red zone, throw the ball into the end zone, allow him to go up and make a play. Really strong hands at the point of attack as well, or at the catch point. So I think Davis Allen is a guy. Could he end up developing? It's something to where I think he's probably a 2nd or 3rd tight end, at least starting out, but a guy who could potentially see himself as a starter, at least a spot starter down the road. You have Josh Wiley there out of Cincinnati, 6'6", 248, 4.69 40 at the combine. This is a guy, I'm glad that he came back. There was talk that he might end up entering the draft last season. He wound up deciding to come back to Cincinnati, and like I said, I'm glad that he did. 88 catches, over 1,000 yards, 1,062, 15 touchdowns in his career. Versatility there, can block a little bit, good athleticism, run after catch, and then I think he can play H-back for you, maybe even line up in the backfield as a fullback. Really a complimentary piece there at that tight end spot. I thought he worked really well with Leonard Taylor, another tight end that could end up coming off the board in this year's draft class. And then there's Will Mallory out of Miami. 6'4", 239. Dude can move. 4'5", 440, 36.5-inch vertical leap. This is a guy that really burst on the scene as a freshman, and then you're waiting for him to continue to develop, and he just never did. So it's really, when teams watch him, can you really get him to really unlock that potential? As in 2019, 16 catches for 293 yards and a couple of scores, but that was 18.3 yards per reception. Over his career, 115 receptions, over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. But he was just one of those guys that he just left you wanting more. And so, but definitely a guy that can get down the field, needs to just showcase that he can be a weapon on a consistent basis. I think that's something that we didn't see from him all the time there in Miami. Because of that, I think 6th, maybe 7th round. He's a guy that, again, all these guys that we're talking about, we said that we see as many as 13, 14 guys taken in the first 5 rounds of the draft. Well, those were 14 tight ends that we just covered. So all of those guys could potentially see their names called or hear their names called in the first 5 rounds of the draft. So if that happens, who could potentially come off the board in round 6 or round 7? Well, I mentioned Leonard Taylor. 6'5", 250, physical blocker. He caught a few passes, but really he's known for his blocking ability. When we talk about a guy like O'Keefe coming off the board in round 6, I think Leonard Taylor, because of that, has a chance to see himself drafted. Another guy is Blake Whiteheart out of Wake Forest, 6'4", 247. If we want to talk about the measurables, 4'7", 40, 163, 10-yard split. Has really small hands, just 8 3/4. So you worry about that a little bit, both as a blocker and as a pass catcher. But with Whiteheart, it's all about the physicality. He loves to get physical. He loves to really grind in the trenches. You see that. Decent athleticism as a pass catcher, though. 24 catches, 295 yards, and 3 touchdowns for the Demon Deacons. Really was kind of a supplemental weapon, a guy that could end up stretching the seam a little bit underneath throws more than anything else. Noah Jindorf there out of North Dakota State, 6'6", 263. Bigger tight end, a guy who, look, North Dakota State, they're known for their blocking. He's the guy that can get that job done. Pretty smooth on the underneath routes. Not a guy that's going to beat you vertically at all. But he's the guy that I could see taking off the board late. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about another Oklahoma jack of all trades, Swiss Army knife, whatever you want to call it. Last year it was Jeremiah Hall, who ultimately didn't get drafted, but was a priority free agent to the Giants, I believe. But with Brayton Willis, 6'3", 241. This is a guy, when you look at the testing, didn't test all that well at the combine, but what he does is he basically does a little bit of everything. He lines up a tight end, lines up a fullback, H-back, was a wildcat quarterback for them. And when you needed a big block to spring a running back to the outside or seal a guy off so they can cut back to the inside, Brayton Willis was the guy that was doing that. If you needed a key reception on a third down, this was the guy that had a knack for just finding ways to get open. And he's a guy that I wouldn't rule out just because of the versatility. And look, 39 catches for 514 yards, 7 touchdowns this past season. Really the most expanded role, really as a dedicated tight end more than anything else. So he's just an intriguing prospect because of the versatility. The question is where are you going to line him up? But so that's why I wonder if he will get himself drafted. But a guy that, man, you want to have him on your roster because he can do a lot of things for you. Kyle Patterson out of Air Force, 6'5", 260. Look, Air Force, you've got to be able to block if you're on their offense. So that's something that I think Kyle Patterson does pretty well. Decent runner. When you see him, you talk about 260 pounds. He's pretty, actually looks pretty lanky. I think you could probably even add some additional size to the guy. But a guy that could definitely stretch the defense a little bit coming down the field. Really good hands as a receiver. And, that's one of the things. Look, Air Force doesn't throw the football a ton. But, when Kyle Patterson was involved in the offense, he really forced you to take notice because of the athleticism. And really the biggest thing was the burst onto the scene there in 2020. 12 catches, 205 yards, and a couple of scores. Only played in 9 games over the last 2 seasons, so that's really what's going to hurt him more than anything else. I also think about Travis Vokolek out of Nebraska. Really started off hot to the season, this past season there, 6'6", 259 yards, and 259 pounds. And when you're talking about Vokolek, transfer from Rutgers, ended up playing in 10 games there for the Cornhuskers, 20 catches, 240 yards, and a couple of scores. But again, a guy that just couldn't stay healthy. So with Patterson and Vokolek, the red flags there with the medicals and checking out, those are guys that you may bring in. You're just not going to draft them. A couple of other names to look out for. Mason Fairchild out of Kansas, 6'5", 251 pounds. I've talked about him previously on my podcast that I wouldn't be surprised if this guy hears his name called at some point in the draft. Not overly athletic, but in his senior season, catching passes from Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean for that matter as well. 35 catches, 443 yards, 6 touchdowns. Really a good blocker, but he was surprisingly able to get down the seam and be a weapon, stretching the defense a little bit and being able to get behind the linebackers. Really a guy, again, not a big athlete, wasn't invited to the combine, but a guy that just always seemed to find a way to make a play for his quarterback. Daniel Barker out of Michigan State, another guy that wasn't invited to the combine, but 6'4", 241 pounds. He's a tremendous athlete. And I think that's one of the things that really jumps off the film when you watch him play. If the name sounds familiar, played 4 seasons there at Illinois before transferring to Michigan State. 85 catches in his career, just a little over 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns. A guy, again, when you look at the play there at Illinois, didn't see the field a ton, didn't play a full slate of games for the Fighting Illini. And so that's really, when you look at a lot of these guys towards the back end of this draft class, injuries really hurt their draft stock, and you really wonder whether or not we're going to see them get drafted at all. But, as I mentioned, when you get through Josh Wiley, you've got 14 tight ends. I think that you're going to see, there's a potential for Leonard Taylor, Blake Whiteheart to get drafted as well, maybe Noah Jindorf. If that happens, that puts us at 17 tight ends. If you want to throw in Braden Willis maybe or Mason Fairchild, that'll get us to 18. One other name that I want to mention at the FCS level, and that's Kimari Averett out of Bethune-Cookman, 6'6", 260. He caught his first touchdown pass from Lamar Jackson in Louisville against Boston College, and then had a domestic incident charges. They were later dropped, but ultimately was dismissed from the Louisville program. Ended up not playing in 2019. We know in 2020 what happened really at the FCS level. Didn't get to play there as well. 2021, he burst onto the scene. 51 catches, 876 yards. That's 17.2 yards per reception and 10 touchdowns. 2022 follows that up with another 40 catches for 450 yards and 7 scores. And what you love about Averett is he knows how to use that big body to his advantage. He boxes out guys, elevates, can be that 50-50 guy, plays it really like a basketball player, going to body guys up and attack that football in the air. So he's one of those intriguing prospects. Obviously, you've got the off-field issues that you worry about, but he's one of those guys that I think NFL teams would at least be intrigued by. Will he get drafted? I think the off-field issues, that's going to be something that they would have to talk with him and be comfortable with that situation, really what happened, and understand the player and really talk to the coaches, talk to him, talk to his teammates, talk to the scouts in the area that have gotten to see him play over the last couple of years, get to know him a little bit, to ultimately decide if they want to use a draft pick on him late or if he's a guy that you're going to bring in onto your roster as a priority free agent. So those are our tight ends in that tight end draft class. Again, I think we're going to see as many as 8 tight ends come off the board in the first 3 rounds. And again, as many as 14 that could potentially come off the board in the first 5. And so it's going to be an interesting draft class with that tight end spot. I think you've got quite a few guys that can end up being tight end 1 come week 1 of the 2023 season. I think there's really a lot of talent here, a lot of guys that can catch the football. But look, a lot of guys that can also do some of the dirty work and do some of that blocking. But I think really you've got Kincaid, you've got Michael Mayer, you've got Darnell Washingon there at the top of that draft class. Luke Musgrave, just really a small body of work with him, but the athleticism is there. And then Sam Laporta, the physicality, Luke Schoonmaker, the physicality to go along with the athleticism. Brenton Strange moving up the draft boards as well. Tucker Kraft, physical presence as a blocker, but also a guy that loves to make plays on the outside as a receiver. It's going to be a fun draft class. I'm excited to see where the tight ends go. So we'll go ahead and put a bow on this podcast, if you will, wrap things up with the tight end spot. We're going to then talk about the offensive line here in the next day or two, really get through tackles, guards, centers, who's going to be that top tackle. Is it going to be Peter Skoronski? Is it going to be Broderick Jones? Is it going to be Paris Johnson? How many tackles are we going to have in round number 1? Will Darnell Wright make it? I think so. Anton Harrison, there's a good chance. Will we see any interior linemen? Osiris Torrance? I think there's a good chance of that as well. Will we see a center? I think we're running out of spots to see a center in round number 1. I mean, if Creed Humphrey can't make a first-round pick, then I don't know that John Michael Schmitz is going to be drafted in round number 1 either, but he's a guy that I think will be an early second rounder as well. So a lot to cover with that offensive line group. So hopefully you'll stick around and listen to that. We're going to make sure that we're bringing these positional breakdowns here. We know that the draft is coming up on the 27th of April, and we're counting down the days. We're just a little over 2 weeks until Roger Goodell approaches the podium, puts the Carolina Panthers officially on the clock for that number 1 overall pick. And I'm excited. I hope you are as well. And until next time, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week. And until next time, I am out of here.